Now you might be wondering how we're going to light this scene. Well, you're in luck. That's what we're going to talk about right here. Now there's several different ways to do that. Let's delete this. Okay, so what you can do is go into the lighting tab and go to V-Ray and create a V-Ray sun like this. Now this is the important part. Would you like to automatically add a V-Ray sky environment map? Our answer is yes. There's already a map because I already did this once. Do you want to replace it? Yes. So I can show you. Now when you go to environment, I've showed you this before in the class, but here's a default V-Ray sky. Now what we can do, we'll place that sun up in the sky, but really, if you look at our photo, there actually is no direct sunlight coming in. So what we want to do is just modify that sky. And you guys might know what HDRIs are and stuff like that, and I plan on adding a little lecture about HDRIs. But the nice thing is that there's a sky already built in to V-Ray. And it's like the old dome lights that we used to use, but it just takes up the whole sky, and it's the color of the sky depending on where and it also adjusts depending on where your sun is at. But we're actually going to disconnect it from the sun, and what I just did there is go into environment, your V-Ray sky is here, that's the one it placed for you, and I dragged it and instanced it to the material editor, which means now we can edit the one here in the material editor, and that will be adjusting the one in our environment slot. Now we can actually just turn off this sun by doing that, and we just want to focus on this sky. So we want to hit this button here that says specify sun node, and then that gives us manual control over the sky, which you can adjust the multiplier of. We want to keep it at 1 like that, and really it's good to go. You can see it's really bright. If you put it at 0.05, you'd see that it starts getting, but when we are thinking about taking a picture inside like this, you have to keep in mind that the light inside is going to be much less relative to the light outside. So if you were taking an exterior shot, this amount of light might be right, but when you're inside, you would expose that camera a lot to make it bright inside, which would relatively blow out the sky outside, if that makes any sense. If you know anything about photography, you probably know what I'm talking about. So we're going to exaggerate this up. Well, it's not really exaggerated. We'll just put it to 1, making that sky really bright outside. But you'll see that inside, it's not that bright because we're inside of a building. So this will allow some of the light to leak in from these openings and start to push natural light into our scene. So we'll see what that looks like. One thing we want to do before we render this lighting is go into the render settings, which you'll find right there, and go into V-Ray, global switches, override material. Make sure it's set to exclude and not include, meaning if you list anything in here, it'll exclude it from our override, which is great. We don't want to exclude anything right now. Let's make sure we've got a regular V-Ray material like this one, just a middle gray, and pop it in there. Just drop it right there, instance it. Now we're overriding, and we can go into our render settings, and we'll talk about them a little bit here. If you're using the demo like I'm demonstrating on here, make sure that you turn on all your GI settings. We'll just set this to a radiance map and light cache, and we'll go into the sampler and make it not progressive but adaptive subdivision. No. Adaptive. Set that to 4. Now I've done all this in other videos, and we'll go over it more later, but for now I just need to show you what this lighting is going to look like. So there is our custom image aspect ratio, which is great. Now let's just hit render and see what it looks like with the lighting. Okay, you can see my override material is not working, so let's check out and see what's going on with that. Looks like because I was in demo mode, it just reset this and turned off the override I already did. Make sure the settings are right. In demo mode, it likes to reset itself, and that's for obvious reasons, to keep people from stealing it. But I'm just demonstrating, so I'm resetting it up. Okay, you can see that there's a lot of light coming in, probably a little too much. So we can maybe turn down the sky. We'll see when it renders. Hold on, let me pause for a second. Okay, there's the rendering. What do you guys think? Looks awesome, right? Not exactly. Looks pretty crappy, actually. You can see that I'm getting way too much light in here in a lot of places, especially on this left side. And let's see, there's too much light there. Obviously, that's blown out. But kind of a bigger problem is the fact that my floor has this weird black going through it. Now, if you ever see that, that means there's a double face somewhere. So what happens is when I was copying that floor around, I obviously copied one strip of it twice and screwed up the whole thing, and then copied that chunk over and over so you can see it repeating. So I need to go in and fix that, and then I'll turn my lighting down and see if we can get it to look better. Okay, I got my floor fixed. Let's change that light real quick by just going into here. Sun intensity multiplier, let's set that to 0.5. See if we can find a happy medium here and render again. Make sure all your settings are right. Okay, that's looking really nice. Let's zoom in on a little bit. There's our bricks. We're getting a lot of natural light pushed into this house, and you notice I put no V-ray lights other than that sky in my environment, and this is what we're getting, which is pretty great. And a couple things to keep in mind is that you can Photoshop a lot. If you look at the picture and compare it to this, the light levels might be different. A lot of that can be cleaned up in Photoshop, okay? That's one thing to remember. The other thing to remember is we put an override material on everything, which is a middle gray. Now, if this was all that dark brown floor, obviously it's not going to be as bright in here as it is as a middle gray, because that dark brown is much darker than the middle gray I'm overriding with. So keep that in mind. If you have a lot of dark materials in the scene you're trying to recreate, then you would want to match that darkness, or at least an average of all those dark materials, with your override material. If you have all white in there, you might want to make your override material very close to pure white, so that your lighting level will be based on the materials that you're eventually going to put in there, if that makes sense. So here we're just using a middle gray because there's a lot of whites, but there's also that dark floor, so I use something in the middle. Okay, now one more thing about lighting. There is a little bit of artificial lighting in the scene. There's those row of lights down the center here, and some over here as well. And those you should use IES lights for. So let me just show you quickly how to use IES lights. Okay, now IES lights are based on a file, and they're based on files that actually correspond to real manufacturer specified lights that are out there. So I did a quick light search for download IES files, and I found this one on mrcad.com, and this one I actually use at work too. This is a PDF preview of how all those lights will put off their patterns. And again, this is based on the manufacturer's information, these files that make these lights emit exactly like the real physical light does. So here you can download the IES lights. I'll save those and I'll show you how to apply them. So get some files like this. They're all over the internet, and the manufacturers, if you actually go to the site of a specific light, they might even provide the IES file for that specific light for you. So find some of these. You can find these ones at mrcad.com. I'm going to get these and show you how to apply them for those interior lights. Okay, inside Max, we just need to create a little light to apply those files to. So what you do is go to lights again, and there's two different ways to do it. There's photometric here, right there. So you can do just a standard target light that is photometric by doing that, dragging it. Okay, and you go into here and modify it. Look for the pattern. Okay, right here under light distribution type, instead of uniform spherical like that, you want it to be a photometric web. And then you choose your photometric file. I'll go and find mine. And once you select it, you can see now it's linking to that right there. And it actually shows you the shape that will emit light in. And you'll see it right there as well. So I can just place that in my scene now in my hallway, which is right here, basically. I want to get that target too. So right there, we'll put it up on the roof. And then you can model a little self-illuminated can or something to put in the roof. But I'm just going to place the light there. And the other way to set up an IES light would be using the V-Ray version, which pretty much does the same thing. So you can go to V-Ray, IES, go to this view. Again, make sure that's in the right spot, and then modify it. Make sure you select just the light, not the target. Modify it, IES file. Go to where your IES file is, plug it in, and then you have all the regular settings that you would expect on a V-Ray light here. So that's how you make the V-Ray lights. I would suggest using those because they create that nice pattern on the wall. This pattern I used isn't necessarily nice, but you can find all sorts of different IES files on the web, download them, plug them into these lights, and it'll create that nice scallop pattern, that nice shape that looks like a real interior light. So I would suggest going to a manufacturer's website of interior can lights, finding a light you like, downloading the IES of it, and then plugging it in as an actual light into your scene. So that's a little bit about the lighting for this scene. It's really simple and straightforward. We have to get that right balance between natural light coming in and then a little bit of artificial light inside. Study the picture, make sure you've got everything right, and then just use these basic lighting techniques to light the scene.